Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, October 26th, episode 254. Today, as Halloween approaches and the new year looms on the horizon, the future of 2024 brings both mystery and promise for employers. We'll embark on an enlightening journey into the heart of pivotal workplace matters with special guest Michael Maciekowicz, our compensation expert. Mikey Mac will unlock the mysteries of wage increases and pay band adjustments, and even step into the unforgiving realm of pay equity. Get ready to see your grasp of these workplace dynamics transform.
All this and more on This Week at Work.
All right. How about that? Whose voice was that there, Nick?
That was actually my daughter's voice. She was in while we were doing some recording yesterday, and I thought she wanted to give her a shot at acting, and I think she did a pretty good job.
She's got a career. Yeah.
You're starting her young. That's great. You have a beautiful young daughter. I've met her, and she's welcome to be our voice in the background anytime. I like it better than Monique's voice. But Mikey, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. We're getting ready in North Carolina for an 85-degree day. So summer's back, and Phil, it looks like you probably need a little tan. Hopefully you're going somewhere to get that.
Yeah, well, I'm down at our Orlando office today. We have our Wayfinder event tomorrow. It's going to be a great program. We have what I like about it is we're able to produce the program here in Florida. We have over 110 people joining us online. I know, Mike, your team is going to be down here as a sponsor and helping those that are in need with compensation. We got Andrew Adenehi, we got Ryan Collier, we have one of our law firm partners down here with us as well. It's going to be a great program, and we're excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I wish you could be here with us, but it sounds like you got some great weather there as well.
That's right.
Take that for this time of the year.
You got it. So, but I'm sure it'll be a wonderful event, as it always is.
Yeah. All right. Before we get started, Mikey, today it's going to be you and me for the program. Burt is out on business, and we wish him well with what he's doing, but he does a great job as always, and he'll be back on the program next week. Also, to keep in mind, on November 2nd, Burt and I will be running a webinar program that's going to be heavily centered around question and answer for those people who have employees in the state of Illinois, and we're going to deal with the Paid Leave Act of Illinois. That will be November 2nd. You can find that on the AIM website. But Mike, we got two questions for our audience today. Let me get those kicked off. The first question is, are pay equity and pay transparency included in your 2024 compensation budget planning? So you have four selections to pick from with that. And then the second question is, what is your organization budgeting for total compensation adjustments? That includes your cost of living, your merit, your market pay adjustments, your total compensation, not just your general wage increase, but what you're going to do across the board. You got to keep in mind pay transparency and equity concerns with that. We'd love to see what you're going to do, and Mikey is going to tell us what the trend is as well. All right, Nick, with Burt not being here, I think we're going to kick off Philbert's Forum. Is that correct?
That's correct. You've just entered Philbert's Forum, where we peel the onion back and take a lighter look at the workplace. All right, so we're made aware of an article that was on BuzzFeed talking about work scams. They had a list of 25, actually had a couple bonus ones, so believe that there's more than 25 things that employees don't like that employers do that needs to be stopped from normalizing.
This is a view from the employee, not the employer.
That is correct. That is correct. So, for example, we have someone who says employers need to stop normalizing, discouraging talking about how much money you make. And the quote here is, "It's literally only a tactic to keep workers from comparing notes and establishing financial fairness."
Yeah, well, I guess I could understand that from the employee's point of view, and being a little old school in myself, coming from the days when we were not allowed to talk about that.
Right.
In fact, if you did, you were at risk of being fired.
That's right.
I definitely could understand someone's point of view that that's a way to prevent us from talking about fairness. Now, at the same time, Mike, I don't know about your family, but my family, growing up in an Italian-American family, it was customary. You walk in, you'd see somebody maybe you haven't saw in a year, and they might go, "Hey, how much you making now?"
That's right.
Who's bringing in now? I mean, whether it was family or friends, I mean, that was not a question that was off the table, but we didn't discuss it at work. Now,
that's true. That's true.
Yes.
Well, my father, I come from a Polish background, and so my father always had to stop at what he called the gin mill on his way home from work. And when we was at the gin mill, that was always the topic of conversation. Okay, so what are you making these days? And he'd come back and he'd start saying, "Gosh darn it, I got to change work because I'm making far less than everybody else."
Yeah.
And the final thing on that other part about the old days was we actually had a policy where I worked that pay was confidential, which meant that if you spoke about pay, you breached confidential information. And that's how people were let go. So those days are long gone, of course.
And Mike, I know we're going to get into pay equity and transparency discussion here in a little bit. Nick, what else you got for us?
Number 23 on the list was companies offering 3% raises while inflation is 8%.
Yeah.
Well, of course, well, people forget the days when we gave 3% increases and we had 1% inflation. Oh, how do we deal with that? No.
Oh, that's a good point. Good point. But it is difficult, right? Employers are trying to manage their overall cost, and inflation is sometimes outpacing the merit increases. I know you're going to give us an insight today on those merit trends. What SHRM and other organizations are predicting, and actually getting a look back and see what happened. But as we think about our auto workers, that's the fight that they're fighting right now, isn't it? I mean, they're saying, no, we want the full inflationary adjustment, as well as the compensation, considering the success of the organization.
That's right. Well, remember in 2022, there were a number of AIM members who provided what they called inflation bonuses to their employees, meaning they still held to a 3% pay adjustment, but they gave another 2% as a flat bonus amount to kind of help to reconcile the difference.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Anything else, Nick?
Yes, we have, the part where I make $100 for my employer and he gives me 10 for my efforts.
Yeah. Now, Nick, be careful. Fred's listening to the program in the background.
No. I should have. No, I'm holding up quote. Hold on a second. I have my quotes going here. It was some other employee.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I remember being a young engineer at one time and designing solutions that saved and prevented the company from spending a lot of money. And, I would get maybe $100 gift card and, a pat on the back, good old, that a boy, Phil, good job. And there was times in my mind, I'm like, that just did not quite seem fair to me. But in the end, that's why we're employed, is to contribute and do those things, unless it's part of your compensation model for sales teams and other incentives.
Right. And that's kind of ties into the way companies have been more transparent today on everything, including their finances. And so when you do that, obviously, then you need to be prepared to have that discussion of how you are tied into that.
That's right. And again, that gets back to the auto workers, right? They're banging the table and they're saying, hey, you guys are making a lot of money at the top of this organization and for shareholders, and we want our portion of that.
Right.
Yeah. Nick?
Yeah, we do have one more if you'd like to go through it. Being gainfully employed without being able to even make basic ends meet.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely something that I hear frequently. That makes me think. I first go to fast food restaurants, right? The first campaign was got to be $15 an hour. Now it's $20 an hour. And I don't know when the last time you went through and bought a Happy Meal is, but oh my goodness, don't buy two of them, right? It's that gets passed on to us as the consumer. And
That's right.
Somewhere in there, it shifted from these are jobs for young people who are, in high school or maybe in college trying to earn a few extra bucks to this is my job, my career, my livelihood, and now I can't earn ends meet. And it just gets passed on. And that's a little bit of being out of whack, maybe with the labor pool shortage as well.
But I think we're starting to see where, forget state legal minimum wages. We're now seeing that $18, $20 an hour kind of living wage. And just because of supply and demand, in order to attract people, I think we're starting to see that catching up in a lot of areas.
It is. Well, that's a great section for Phil Burt's Forum. Those are from the employee's point of view, and we had a little bit of fun with that. But nevertheless, I think they're very fair statements of how many of our employees look at compensation. And that being today's conversation with Mikey Mack joining us. He is our senior consultant for compensation for Mastron Solutions. Those of you that have worked with him understand the value he can bring. And today he's going to share with us some of the mysteries for compensation in 2024. We're going to really have three key insights. The first one's going to be, we're going to talk about pay equity and transparency. And Mike, as I'm introducing that, I want you to just give some thought to help us with the difference in how one feeds the other, how transparency creates equity. The other topic we're going to talk about is wage increases and what is being predicted for the upcoming year of 2024. And then the never-ending discussion around pay bands and grade adjustments and how to manage those in such a dynamic time that we're experiencing right now with inflation. And the biggest issue, Mike, that I continuously hear, I want to throw it out there so you can fit it into the conversation, is we've done a great job with pay transparency and equity. We have great pay grade bands or pay grades and bands. We do fair adjustments, and now I have a vacancy. I have to go to the outside and hire someone, and that person, for me to get the person I want, is going to cause my whole pay system to be out of whack. So you can squeeze that into the conversation somewhere. That would be great. But let's kick it off with pay equity and transparency, Mike. First, tell us what is the difference and how did these two work together?
Sure. So pay transparency is really being driven by our millennials, our Gen Zs, and now our Gen Alpha, the new gen coming through, that basically they expect everything's been transparent all their life. So in school and everywhere they've gone, so they're expecting that in the workplace. And so they're
started with participation awards.
Correct. So yes, so when that happened, of course, many states have taken that on. Illinois being one of those for AIM members, starting in 2025, requirement to post grades and ranges and your hiring ranges. So with pay transparency, the more we now know about the value of a job and the range of the job, and of course I know where I'm being paid in that job, it starts raising questions very logically. I look at that and I go, okay, so that range has a maximum of $30 an hour. I've been here 12 years and I'm making $21 an hour. So that's where we start getting into the discussion of pay equity. Why am I not being paid properly within that range? And that raises a concern because, we do have laws and regulations in terms of protected classes. So as people start seeing more in transparency, they're starting to raise more questions about pay equity.
Mike, with pay transparency, how important is it in your mind to share with people, here's your pay grade or your range, whatever you want to call it. Here's where you're at, and this is our target. How often when you're working with an organization do you spend time talking about what is your target pay within a range?
Correct.
You gave the example that, someone who's been there for many years is still very low in the grade. That might be okay if your target is low in the grade.
Correct. And I think that's where a lot of organizations haven't done a very good job in trying to explain how, first of all, what are we focusing on in that range? So if we're a midpoint philosophy, for example, that we set our midpoints of the range, meaning midway through the range based on the market, so that as you're below that midpoint, that means you're developing your skills. And if you're over the midpoint, you obviously have exceeded what our expectations are. The problem is that most organizations haven't really addressed that pay equity compression as they've updated their ranges. So for them to go out and say, we have a midpoint philosophy of the market, and then I'm sitting there with, again, my 8 years, and I think I'm doing a great job, and I'm below that point, that again raises a pay equity concern about how I'm being treated as an individual.
Now, that may not be a legal pay equity concern.
Correct.
If everyone is paid in that same respective position. Right. So you're not really referring to a legal position. You're talking about pay equity to your philosophy of pay at that point.
Correct, which also has then an impact, obviously, on employee relations, employee engagement, and reputation, right? Yeah. So people talk and they'll say, well, my employer is a low payer all the time. And so people know that. It puts a lot of pressure on recruitment and retention.
What frequency, if you talk about best practice, I'm going to look at my pay grade and I'm going to make an adjustment to a pay grade. What frequency is that, and what are some of the things that organizations should look at when considering those adjustments?
Right. So traditionally, let's go like before 2022, which kind of changed things a little bit for us with that dramatic inflation. Traditionally, we were generally looking at everywhere from 2 to 3 years we could hold our ranges, meaning that, they're wide enough, we had enough, they were broad enough that we could deal with the 2-3% movements that were occurring. And also traditionally, ranges usually were adjusted about half of what your normal pay adjustment budget was. So if you had a 3% pay across the board, 1.5% would be about what you would just tweak your ranges. You didn't have to do dramatic moves. The problem came in with 2022, obviously, was that when we hit that 8% inflation, our ranges totally got out of whack. And of course, with the supply and demand issue on top of that, so people have been trying to catch up with their ranges. However, now we have a reverse problem. We didn't provide the employees that same amount, meaning organizations moved ranges 10% in some cases, but they weren't providing 10% increases for their employees, which now created more compression at the lower part of the ranges.
Yeah, for sure. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a group of HR professionals, roundtable conversation. We were talking about, we got into the topic of pay equity. And many of them felt like, well, they do a good job managing fairness within the organization. So let's just use a group of engineers all paid within a fair range of each other, and they feel like they have equity within the organization, all within a band. Right. Then they have to go outside and hire a new engineer, and the person they choose that they want to hire is demanding significantly more money. Right. And the question was, do I then take everybody and move them forward? So the cost of that one engineer is going to cost me the addition of all the adjustments, or can I leave them there and still say I have pay equity, fairness?
Yeah. So I think that the answer to that is how we control and administer our system. So a lot of clients today and organizations are now putting a lot of teeth into their administrative policies, in which they then are working through recruitment with the managers and saying, look, let's look at what that offer is going to do to your group. And they actually have that information analyzed in advance. And then it turns out that, hey, but if you hire this person, it creates a complete inequity, and we're going to have to make other adjustments in order to accommodate that. The answer sometimes to that manager is, let's look at your number 2 candidate or your number 3 candidate, because we may not really be able to deal with that based on our current pay equity compression.
It really becomes the affordability, but I think
Correct.
where you do have risk is when you do bring that person in, and sometimes it can be a younger person than some of the other people within your system, and you pay them more, you may create a problem for yourself that creates risk, and you have to determine your risk profile.
Correct.
Okay. Mike, any great examples of how organizations communicate their pay transparency, if you will?
Okay,
So
yes.
great time. How are organizations communicating that to their business in a best practice?
Right. So with our experience now with New York, for example, which we've had for over a year, the requirement for pay transparency, one of the things that we found was very helpful was, first of all, educating our managers and supervisors, because they need to understand, they've only been told the ranges for their jobs under their department. So what our clients are now doing is we're actually having meetings with department heads and saying, here's our entire system. So they now can also see in advance how jobs have been placed in the pay grade and range system, so that as that and they can ask the questions in advance so that they're prepared, so that when it now goes to the employees in terms of the posting process, then they can actually be able to answer the questions. Another client actually went ahead and sent every employee a letter or an email that said, this is your pay grade, this is your range from min to max. And actually, because it was in writing, what's going to happen. They're sharing it everywhere. Right. And so they took care of it, though.
Send it to me in an email. I might send it to everyone. And
that's true.
The reality is that wouldn't be wrong today. And that goes back to our first, fun comment in Gilbert's forum.
Correct. And that's where you have to get your leaders also to buy in early on that, look, this is coming. So it's no longer a secret among us in the C-suite of how we're paying people. And our competitors will probably hear about this as well. So we have to be prepared for that. And there needs to be some education early on. So that's really the best practice we've been following.
I did have, and this is a point not to be overlooked. I did have, when we say we got to get our leaders aligned, if your leaders don't feel that they're aligned with their pay themselves, then it's a non-starter, right? I mean, forget about it. You gotta, they have to feel that they're being paid fairly and equitably within their group themselves in order to go and support that position. And you get back to wage compression, there's a lot of times our leaders don't feel that themselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, let's move on to wage increases. I want to be able to get through some of this.
Sure.
You got your crystal ball. What can you tell us about where we've been and where we're going as far as wage increases?
So it looks like as we've gone through the year, statistically, we're finding that we're averaging in 2023 about 4.1%. So that's, a little bit lower than we thought. And I know we've talked a little bit back in 2022, we were more at the 5.5, or even 6. So that, though, has been what the overall increases in terms of base pay. So we're not talking about market adjustments, compression studies, minimum wage
for all
impact.
The pay equity we just talked about.
Right. We're only talking about what people have been budgeting for their normal merit or COLA. So that's still running in that 4.1, and projections are about the same going into 2024 in terms of that. However, because of pay transparency and pay equity, we know from client history recently, we're spending at least 1 or 2% more of payroll in getting adjustments to correct any issues that we find. So we're still sticking with our 5% overall on market adjustments.
Yeah. Now, I know one thing that employers struggle with, and when I was working in large business, we struggled with this ourselves. you're giving someone, let's just say, a 4.1% adjustment, and then they need their pay equity adjustment on top of that, but you really don't feel like that person performs as well as the other people in that same pay band.
Right.
But they are clearly behind, and it's a confusing message, right? I'm going to give you your average pay increase because you deserve that, but you don't deserve more than average. And then I'm going to give you a pay equity adjustment because you're not paid fairly, which makes me happy. And the message is, but I need you to perform better. You really didn't earn this. You're getting this because of your group positioning.
So the answer to that is
message.
To link the two together, though. We have clients now that are actually linking performance and equity in terms of your position in the range. So a quick example, I'm at the bottom of the range, but I'm the best performer. So instead of me getting the normal 3.5, I'm going to get a 5 or 6% because I need to move you closer to our midpoint philosophy. However, I'm at the top of the range and I'm kind of just getting by. We may not give you anything because you're already paid appropriately. So it's really what we call range management in terms of where people are in the range. You can link that combined with performance to be sure that you're getting that right message.
Yeah. And I think the documentation for that is critical. I know I've had to deal with that more than one time in my career from that standpoint. All right, we got just a couple of minutes left, Mikey. Let's get on to pay band and grade adjustments and disparities and kind of what to expect when we get into those things.
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to when we look at first of all, pay band adjustments. I just mentioned that, we're probably going to see that return to more normalcy, where we're only looking at approximately 1/2 of the normal adjustment in terms of our actual pay band adjustment. The other thing we're finding, though, is how we define the bands, meaning when we look at a range, there was many years it was traditionally based only on tenure, right? Where you are in the range, midpoint, 10 years, maximum 20 years. More and more organizations are getting away from that and making a different decision on competency, meaning looking at the lower part of the range as a learning zone, middle part for fully competent, the top part of the range for more expert, so that you can now move people horizontally and use the range as a career path, which is very important today because many organizations, we can't move vertically, but we can provide opportunity horizontally. So that's becoming a new trend more and more of how we use our range to help with, especially our Gen Zs looking for career progression.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Let's take a look at the survey polls right here before we go. Nick, if you can share that on the screen. The first one is what is the pay equity and transparency included in your 2024
interesting
planning? That's quite interesting there. If I look at that, the leading result is no, but maybe next year for 2025.
Right.
But 25%, greater than 25%, I said yes, and it was included in our 2023 as well. What's your thought?
Over half are saying that they've been actually considering it.
That's right. And yes, for the first time. So I think that's a great result. And that's, I think, the expected result when we look at those questions that we were having fun with in the beginning. It's a sign of the times.
That's right. Okay, the next.
Okay, what is your organization budgeting for total compensation adjustments?
Right. Okay.
That's right in line with your crystal ball, Mike, 4 to 5%.
That's right. We're following along, and we had 20% that are saying it's going to be greater than 5. So people are now understanding the difference between just a wage adjustment on the base and the total compensation when we deal with compression, market, and the like.
Yeah. I think that as we continue to have a tight labor market, I mean, the demand is going to be in favor for the job seeker.
Correct.
And they're going to be able to make demands that we're going to have to accommodate the best that we can. That's going to continue to push and create pressure on our current structure.
I agree.
my guess is we're going to be in flux for a while in managing that structure. And that's the reason that, you want to work with someone like Mikey Mac, whoever your compensation consultant is, to have a plan and approach. You don't want to be, crumbling up the paper, throwing it over your shoulder and starting over every single year with a new approach. You want to have a planned approach, work your plan the best that you can, to put yourself in position to minimize your risk, and capitalize on, a pay structure that works to your advantage, not one that is really creating more headaches for you. Mike, I'm really happy to be having some of your team down here in Florida with us tomorrow. I'll be looking for them at the bar tonight. Until then, we will be back here next week at 7:30 Central Time, 8:30 Eastern Time. We'll see you then. Take care. Bye.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.